Happy to be joined now by U.S. Soccer Hall of Famer Tab Ramos and a guy who's coached a bunch of these current national team players. First off, Tab, thanks for the time. Let me get your thoughts here. As I mentioned, you coached a bunch of these guys: Serginho Dest, Timothy Weah, Chris Richards. The list goes on and on. Tyler Adams. Just your initial thoughts on Gregg getting fired. Was this the right move by U.S. Soccer? Was it the right time?
Hey guys, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it. I thought I was coming on to talk about the new marketing director that U.S. Soccer hired. I guess this is not it.
We changed it up on you, Tab.
Yeah, we had to switch it up.
Sorry, we changed the rundown.
Totally not prepared for this part. So no, look. Obviously, this is a scenario that's been coming now for a little while. I'm a little bit surprised that, if U.S. Soccer says this is the beginning of the search, that we haven't been prepared for this, because the signs have been there for a little while now that this team was just not moving forward. In terms of what the steps are next, well, we'll see. They've taken the first step that's been important, which was at the moment removing the coach. And by the way, this is not an anti-Berhalter sort of rant. This is more talk about how can we make this team better, and how can we maximize what we can do with the players that we have. And obviously, there's been a long run with the current coach, and now it's time to kind of press the gas and move towards 2026, which is an incredibly important moment.
Tab, you've been in the system, so you've seen the pipeline, and you've helped fuel that pipeline of players. In looking at 2026, do you see any new players, younger players, or players that maybe you had coached or seen coming through and coming into this team to kind of add the unpredictability, to not make it seem as if every player has their position? And what kind of coach do you think can get the most out of this group? What type of coach that needs to come in to have that type of experience? Do they need the international experience? Do they need to have trophies and accomplishments behind them to get the respect in the locker room?
Well, I mean, I think there's an approach that I think will be important here, looking into the future. I think, there's certainly I feel that the players have underachieved a little bit. So there's a little bit of a responsibility on the players' side as well. But sometimes, by changing the coach, that happens. It happens everywhere, not just national team level, but with clubs. Sometimes you change the coach, and there's a different motivation for players coming in. What kind of coach can you bring in? I mean, that all depends on what the goals of U.S. Soccer are going to be at the moment. If it was my approach, I would just look at this opportunity, this World Cup opportunity, as a sort of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we have to go with the coach that we think is going to get the most out of these players. I mean, and you could go. I mean, there's obviously, and I've heard a lot of the names that have been thrown out there, but you can go from like if I were to give an example, you can go from like a Jose Peckerman, for example, who's been experienced, who's out there, by the way, who's had the experience of leading Colombia for a long time, having them play well, who's also very tactical and can be defensive at times, but changes things around. You can go to Thomas Tuchel, who's very tactical and very demanding, and you can go to anywhere in between. And obviously, Jurgen Klopp is one of these people that people have discussed and talked about. I have no idea whether he'd be interested in this job or not, but that's someone that would elevate sort of the view of people of our national team. I know the effect that Jurgen Klinsmann had when he came onto the national team. That opened doors not just for our national team everywhere in the world to be received in a different way, to be respected in a different way, but it also opened the doors to a lot of younger players into clubs with calls that he would make on his own. So there's I think a wide spectrum of coaches that you can hire, but there's no question that I think we're at a very good moment right now to hire a coach that's just going to lead us through the World Cup without having to make promises, towards the next 10 years of development of our players and development of our national team. We need somebody that's going to be prepared, someone who has been there and done that, I believe, and someone who's going to win games.
So, Tab, I've been on this rant since the U.S. got knocked out against Netherlands in December of 2022 about how important it is to be playing week in and week out at your club and keeping yourself informed. If you were given the job, how important would that message be to this current group of players?
Well, I mean, it's incredibly important because I think to the next coach, it shouldn't matter whether a player is playing in MLS or is playing, like I've said before, in China or in Europe or somewhere else. But you certainly need players that are playing 90 minutes. And look, if we look into the past, we've played many times, and we've had national teams many times in which players played who weren't necessarily playing all the time at their club. But we're not at that moment now. Between all of the American players that we have playing everywhere, we have players who are ready and prepared to play. And to me, when I watch us, sort of cater to, let's say Tyler Adams' minutes, as we're leading into like a very important tournament, as we watch, Gio Reyna not play for his team and start every game for the national team, as we do the same with Turner, as we do with other players, I think we're leaving ourselves short. There's guys who are playing 90 minutes who can help the team. And by the way, Charlie, you asked me about, okay, who are those young guys that are coming in? Those young guys coming in, I'm not sure. I'm not sure at the moment. We really have to look at whoever's on the Olympic team, and we have to give some chances. I feel like the roster hasn't been expanded enough over the last couple of years to give those opportunities to guys that maybe are not at the level right at that moment. But when you allow and you open the doors to them, to the senior national team, all of a sudden they bring something new that maybe you weren't expecting, because they're willing to go the distance and they're willing to fight for the national team, and the team has gotten a little bit stale. So everybody knows what the starting team's going to be, whether you play or not. You coming into play, and we lost that sharpness, and we need that back.
Tab, you've worked with a lot of these players, as Tony alluded to. What type of manager would these players respond the most to? What type of qualities does the manager need to get the most out of this group?
Well, I think, and a lot of people said this, that the players have been very very comfortable. Being comfortable, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think players need to be comfortable when they come to the national team. Now, there's the comfort of being on the national team and discussions with the coach about life and and all of those things. But then there's the moments when you step on the field and where there's practice. And I think some of that leadership, and I'll get to the coach in a second, but some of that leadership also has to come from players. I mean, obviously we come, including yourself, Charlie, and I say we when I refer to myself and Tony because we're a little bit older, but we come from generations, including yours, in which there was always a guy in the locker room that's willing to grab your shirt and say, let's go, man. And that's every practice. That's not just in the games. And I think we need a little bit of that. And I think players need to be a little bit responsible for that needs to happen in the locker room. And that leads you into the coach, right? That leads you into a coach that's going to be the no-nonsense guy. And that doesn't mean that he can't talk to you about life or your children or your kids in school. That's all good. But at the end of the day, you need to know that if you're not doing your job, whether that's 30 minutes into a game or 40 minutes into a game, not 80, that you're coming off. And you're coming off because someone else is ready on the bench to come in and take your spot. There's not that comfort zone, not only from the players who are on the field, but I feel like there's a comfort zone from the players who are also on the bench saying, hey, this is pretty nice. I'm on the national team and I'm a sub and everything is good. No, everything's not good if you're on the bench. If you're one of the guys on the bench and you're feeling like everything is good, something's missing there. You need to be earning your spot. You need to be taking the spot from someone else. And I feel like we missed that.
Last one for me, Tab, and appreciate your time. Look, 2026 is less than 2 years away. When you look at this group, if we can maximize the talent in that dressing room, what's the ceiling for this group?
The ceiling, we don't know. But what we do know is that whatever that ceiling is, we have to overachieve over that ceiling because every team has done that. And that's the sign of a good coach. The sign of a good coach is that you can get more out of the team that someone else can, right? This is why coaches get fired anyway. That's why, I got fired myself. I mean, This happens. It doesn't mean that you're a bad coach if you get fired. It just means you need somebody that can get more out of the team than you have right there. And so the ceiling, I don't know, but I do know that we'll be playing at home. The players will be excited. Our fans will be excited. And the team has to show that on the field, and we have to beat teams that we're not supposed to beat.
Man, Tab, appreciate the insight. I mean, you two started all in '94. You got us all hyped, and now we have this incredible moment right in front of us in 2026, and it's a big moment for U.S. soccer. So hopefully we can get it right and inspire a whole nother generation of kids.
Thank you for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.